Major League Baseball should not feel like Alabama playing some 1AA team. I don't know how that's going to change.
Well, Buster Olney joins us now. Is this your version of the Ravech train? Like, instead of it actually rolling, you're kind of stuck somewhere. You almost look like you're in a men's room.
That's right. It's a Monday, which means that I'm in an airport someplace. Right at the moment, I'm at the Minneapolis airport, which is nice because I can find some space. It's empty here. You're right. It does look like I'm in a bathroom, but at least you can find the space, unlike in Atlanta or LaGuardia, White Plains Airport, where you feel embarrassed that you're shouting about baseball. I really felt sorry for the fellow travelers who were like, I don't want to hear about Walker Buehler or the Cubs or what Justin Turner said on Sunday Night Baseball.
No, the amazing part, you literally look like you're in a house. I mean, you look like you're in your own room. You're clearly speaking very loudly, and nobody appears to be around you to hear any of this.
Thank goodness. Like I did. I found a place. I can't see another human being where I am. I'm right at the end of Concourse C, up an escalator near an elevator, and found some privacy, which is great.
All right, let's get into some baseball here. Unfortunately, the Cubs do play in front of one of the great fan bases in America. They will still come out to watch the games, but you were just at the Dodgers and Cubs series. It doesn't feel like a lot of people are going to be enthused about watching Cubs baseball. Just describe kind of the dynamic between Dodgers, Cubs, and what you saw.
Yeah, and before I answer the question, how are you feeling? I mean,
I'm feeling very good. No, thank you. Symptoms are going away.
Yeah, I'm sure, because I've had those times. I remember I got poison ivy a few years ago that was just basically covered the whole entire lower half of my body, and I couldn't go to do the Sunday night game. And you feel like, come on, man, which is where you were last night.
I was definitely a come on man. I'm a come on man this morning. It's a weird one because you can't, you don't want to expose anyone else to it. That's for darn sure. But you feel well enough to go out and do any activity you've done before. So as long as things continue to trend in the right direction, I'll be back with you guys in St. Louis.
Well, you were missed, with all due respect to our friend Boog Shambi, and look forward to seeing you again. And I'm glad you're on the men. Look, it's not very often, especially in Sunday night games, where typically you have two of the best teams playing against each other, where you go into a game and you feel like Team A has no chance to beat Team B. But that's the way it felt. Watching the doubleheader play out on Saturday, with the Dodgers dominated, even without getting that many hits, going into the game on Sunday, knowing Walker Buehler was going to pitch, Marcus Stroman gets scratched, COVID-related, we're assuming. Look at the lineups. Look at these teams, and, the Dodgers are a terrific team, incredibly athletic, so dynamic, great offense, great pitching, et cetera. But the Cubs are really bad, Carl. And I must say, it was a reminder that when the Cubs are bad, it's very different than, say, when the Red Sox are bad. Like the home crowd, I think they understand this team is going through a retooling, rebuilding process. They're coming out, they're filling the stands. If the Cubs have a big moment, they'll cheer. If they have a bad moment, they kind of shrug their shoulders a little bit. I think they get what's going on.
That's a good question, because it's a hard one to understand what's going on. We've just won a World Series. We had 3 huge name players. We're not willing to pay them, and we decide maybe it's kind of a time to move on from Rizzo and Baez and Bryant. But money shouldn't be a factor. We have a good manager. So, that's an interesting one, that people would understand what's going on. There are certain places, you know this very well, there are certain cities where that type of rebuild is like forbidden, like you can't go there. And a lot of me thinks the Cubs have kind of moved to that level. Like, okay, they're in that same conversation where bottoming out. And I know the Red Sox have finished, last 3 times here in the last 10 years. Like, I get where they've been, but it didn't feel like they were totally tearing things down. When I saw the lineup last night, and you don't see Wisdom in it or Schwindel in it, you're like, those are now the familiar names in the Cubs lineup. And that in itself seems a little bit strange to me.
Carl, I think that you're right. The Cubs should be in that echelon of teams that never, rebuild or tank or whatever you want to call it. But that's where we are. And Tom Ricketts is the only one who can really answer this. but I'll absolutely believe that that's directly related to what happened during the pandemic, 2020. They had the real estate around the ballpark, which they invested in. They weren't able to cash in. According to folks with other teams I talked to, the Cubs were certainly conveying to other teams that they were very cash strapped. And so last year, they trade off all those big names that cut their payroll way down. This year, it's going to be another cut down season. Wilson Contreras will be on another team when we get to the trade deadline. He's going to be dealt. Maybe Kyle Hendricks will be dealt if he can pitch better than he has early in the year. Wade Miley, who they picked up during the offseason, he's going to be dealt. The relievers who are actually doing well, like a David Robertson, those guys are going to get flipped the way that last year we saw Craig Kimbrell, Ryan Tepera, Andrew Chafin get traded. I think it's going to be another cut down year for the Cubs. And next year will be the year you'll start to see them take a big step forward.
That's disappointing.
I don't know. I agree with you, though. I don't think it should be that way, Carl.
No, think about it. The Cubs' run differential is, I think, minus 20. They scored 21 runs in one game. So You're minus 20 with a 21-run game. The Dodgers, on the other side, they're a plus 74, and they're blowing everybody else up. The Yankees are second, and they're 25 runs behind where the Dodgers are. You talked a lot Sunday night about Seiya Suzuki, and it's like literally we're going to just spotlight. This is the one positive on this team. Great guy, big story, wears 27 for Trout, Saki, and all that stuff that was shared with the executives. He had to be sold on the weather and Chicago and the climate. How do you now bring him in and say, remember Kyle Hendricks? You remember Wilson Contreras? Remember we kind of promised this great city, this atmosphere, and we won a World Series a few years ago. It's now your team. Like, it's your team. How do you explain? How do you think that conversation goes?
Yeah, in a year or two, it'd be interesting to ask him about that because he's still in the honeymoon phase. And the story you're talking about, it was very funny to hear David Ross relate that to us in the at a pregame meeting, where he said that when they were recruiting Suzuki, that was the big question they got back. Like, tell me about the weather, because I don't want to play in the cold. And so Jed Hoyer generated all these charts on the weather and compared it to Hiroshima, where Suzuki had been playing. In other words, look, it's not that bad. It's the same as you have there. And the weather, as you know, in the Northeast, upper Midwest this spring has been awful. And so Suzuki, who is just early in trying to learn English, a couple weeks into the season, stopped by Ross's office, ducked his head in the door and looked at Rossi and said, those charts you gave me, this was in English. Those are BS, except it was the first sign of English. And that's what David Ross said. Oh, that was Jed Hoyer's doing. So They're getting a laugh out of that now. But you're right. I'm sure that Suzuki's watching this play out and wondering, hey, what happened to this team around me? They do believe that he's going to be at the centerpiece of the team as we move forward. He got off to a great start. It's clear the league is making adjustments to him. Last night, Walker Buehler didn't even throw him strikes. He's like, I'm going to spin the ball out of the zone off the plate, and you're going to chase it. And he did. Top of the zone, off the edge of the zone. And so now the question is, Suzuki, will he make the adjustment? By all accounts, Mike Trout chimed in last night in a text message that he'd been talking to Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani was talking about a great hitter. He'll figure it out. But, Carl, they're going to need a lot of help around him.
I was going to say, I mean, the other comparison when he talks about wearing 27, Mike Trout now has Ohtani and Rendon and Ward around him, and the Angels are playing great. A lot of the conversation, Buster, so far this year has been about the two teams in New York. It may be time to kind of refocus on the West Coast and the two teams in Los Angeles. I mean, the Angels are terrific, and we'll talk about them perhaps at another time. But the Dodgers, we all expected them to be this good. Buehler is on an historic start to not only the season, but his career. Mookie Betts, again, seems to have figured it out. Whether it's a mental skills coach or whatever, he's hitting the ball. That Turner's going to hit. Trey Turner, who's hitting. Like, you can just feel that the Dodgers are potentially just going to run away with the National League. Forget the National League West. As good as that is, with all teams being over 500, when you saw them and you spoke to them, are the Dodgers themselves more impressed with their pitching or their offense?
Oh, boy. I think right now the pitching. I mean, their pitching is performing at a historic level. I tweeted this out yesterday that their ERA, their team ERA, is more than 3 times lower than that of the Cincinnati Reds. You know, they are having the best start for any pitching staff since 1969. And this is at a time when Dave Roberts has acknowledged to us last night is holding back with some of his guys. He's limiting the innings of Clayton Kershaw, as we saw with that perfect game. He's using Walker Buehler once a week. It's like Walker Buehler's going back to when he was pitching in college. You know, he pitched last Sunday, he pitches this Sunday. They built a great bullpen. But I think what jumped out at me and this time seeing the Dodgers, Karl, the most was the athleticism. And I thought Eduardo did a great job of highlighting that when you see Cody Bellinger, even though he's not hitting great, you know, there's a little chopper in the infield, he's busting it down the line. The other Dodgers were saying the thing they've learned about Freddie Freeman since he joined the team that they didn't know is what a great base runner he is.
Yeah.
You know, Chris Taylor busts it, Trey Turner, Mookie Betts, just unbelievable athletes up and down that lineup. And you know, and I know that when we get to the trade deadline, whoever the best player is available, Andrew Freeman's going to be right in there looking to pick up that guy.
It's really cool. The teams that are going to be currently right in there to pick up that guy are the two teams in New York, the two teams in Los Angeles. So that part of it is really cool. And the entire NL West may be invested in that conversation too. You and I touched on this last week on the podcast. You know, you mentioned how good the Dodgers are and the Yankees and the Padres and the Brewers are off to a great start and the Angels are off to a great start. I'm curious, is this like if you were to forget the airport, let's get on a highway. If you were to get on a 3-lane highway, you got your fast lane, you got your center safe lane, and you got your slow lane. It feels like the fast lane has got a bunch of really good cars in it. The slow lane has got a bunch of duds, and the middle lane's kind of wide open. Are we really looking at a have and have not in Major League Baseball this year more than we have in the past?
Yeah, I believe that we do. I looked it up this morning. There are 9 teams with winning percentages that would take them to 100 or more wins. 9 out of 30 teams. You know, think about that. It feels like in 25 years ago, if a team won 100 games in a season, that was special. 9 teams on a pace to win 100 games. It shouldn't feel, to me, Major League Baseball should not feel like Alabama playing some 1AA team.
Right.
And that's what this series between the Cubs and the Dodgers felt like. I don't know how that's going to change. I feel like now that, you know, the place that everyone's trying to avoid is that middle lane that you're talking about. They either want to be in the fast lane or they want to be in the slow lane, cutting down their payroll, the Orioles, the Pirates, the Cubs, et cetera, or they want to be a team that's trying to go for it. It's not a good dynamic. You know, when we are sitting there on Saturday, like I was, I don't know if you feel this way too, because you were there on opening night and David Bell, manager of the Reds, it's a season opener, and you know how much he cares about baseball, and his team is going weeks between wins. You're just like, boy, I hope the Reds at least get one game in that doubleheader against the Pirates. Thank God they're up to 5 wins now or whatever it is.
You know, the best thing for the Chicago Cubs are the Cincinnati Reds, because as bad as it is right now for the Cubs, the Reds are sitting there. I mean, 9-18 as we begin this week versus 5-23. We're 5-23. Imagine that scene in the movie Bull Durham. How do we even win 5? I mean, that's where they're at, and that's really discouraging. The other aspect of fast lane, slow lane is middle lane, and when you're in the middle lane, or you believe you should be in the fast lane, and you skip the middle lane, you end up in the slow lane. That strikes me as where the Red Sox are. They late add Trevor Story at the end of spring training, and all of a sudden there's this sort of feeling of, wait a sec, we are really in this. And then you're reminded that Sale's going to be out. Now all of a sudden James Paxton elbow barks and Sale's got a setback, and everything that can go wrong is going wrong. The bullpen has been a disaster. They're an undisciplined approach at the plate, which they've never been under Alex Cora. If we want to go to another analogy, it feels like there's some rumblings in an earthquake and at some point, or a volcano, and it's just going to explode. Boston finds themselves real close to the bottom of baseball, let alone their own division. What do you make of what's happening up in the Commonwealth?
Look, Wrigley Field, we talked about it before. You know, the Cubs are bad, and so Cubs fans are sort of golf clapping their way through the season. Okay, we're okay. Wrigley Field's a beautiful park, and we're fine with that. In Fenway Park the other day when they lost the game to the White Sox, and I think this was in the 10th inning when they had the ghost runner at second base. And Karl, it absolutely jumped out at me. There was a line drive. Maybe it was off Matt Barnes. A line drive head out to right center field. And before the ball checked down, the fans in Fenway knew that not only was the ball was going to land, but the go-ahead run was going to be scored by the White Sox. They began to boo before the ball landed. I can't remember that. I have seen, and you have seen, a big money player, free agent, target in the offseason, go into a big market and be under this sort of scrutiny that Trevor Story is. What a difficult place to be less than 6 weeks from the start of his Red Sox career, where the booing of Story now has become a thing, right? I mean, do you agree with me that now it's almost becoming sport?
Well, the game you're talking about, the Red Sox had an opportunity in the ninth inning. I think they had 2 men on and could not get a run across. Then you get to the 10th inning, and it's to the point of Red Sox fan, they're going to score. They do score, and it's over. I guess the other part that's interesting to me, Alex Cora has told us many times before about the 10th inning ghost runner. We're going to get one. The question is, do we only get one or do we get more than one? That whole bravado, that whole feeling of, well, they can score one because we're going to get one, if not 2 or 3, when we come to the plate. That whole thing is gone. I mean, literally the level of confidence that he would exude or that the team would take from him early in the season is wiped out. I mean, you're slumdogging it there. You're walking out in the field, your shoulders are slumped and your head is down. That's what that team feels like. And that's not who it's been when he's been in charge.
So I brought up this potential triage, and I want to get your opinion on this on the podcast the other day. I've heard rumblings within the organization that they're beginning to recognize how crucial it is for them to revisit the Xander Bogaerts signing. They gave that 1-year extension offer, $30 million, which was embarrassing. In the end, the offer that they had on the table for him was $60 million less than what they just gave Trevor Story, $50 million less, $50 million less than what Javier Baez got. And even though Xander Bogaerts is a great pro, and it's not going to affect the way he shows up and walks through the door every day, I do think that's cancerous. When you have a guy, who's so important in that clubhouse and that franchise, now potentially following Mookie Betts out the door, the team is doing terribly. And I mentioned my idea was I think the Red Sox, John Henry, Tom Werner, Sam Kennedy, need to invite Xander to lunch and say, look, you know what? We blew it. And we need to restart these conversations, because I feel like that's the first domino in what we're seeing right now, Karl. This team that just looks down, dispirited, not playing well. And you wonder if they're disconnected. Starting with that, as I say, I just know how those things can play out in clubhouse. Do you buy that or no?
Oh, I buy it. I think the biggest challenge is going to be the acknowledgement, using your premise, the acknowledgement that we blew this, which means if you're going to put Henry and Werner and Bloom and even Cora in that room, one of them is responsible for that decision. And I don't know that you're ever going to get one of them to say, that was on me, or they're going to fake it and say, we collectively screwed this up, because that's just not the case. Clubhouses. People know. People understand where that came from. That's a real hard one to swallow. The concept of it is noble. I understand it. There's got to be an acknowledgement that we love Bogaerts. We are okay with his age. We want him to stay here for another 5 or 6 years. I'm not certain that if you really cut them open and get to the truth serum, that they would all believe that. But I understand your point. It seems pretty simple. Sign Bogaerts, sign Devers, get some pitching, act like you're a big market team, and go from there and compete. That seems to be what other teams in your division are doing.
If you don't sign Bogaerts, what do we really believe the chances are that they're going to sign Rafael Devers? Okay.
Right.
And Devers go into next year in free agency. What's the impact on your fan base? Because it's not Cubs fans in Wrigley Field, right? They're not going to just golf clap their way through a season. Their unhappiness is going to manifest with empty seats, lower ratings on NESN. And look, if you're the Yankees, you're paying big money to Garrett Cole and to Giancarlo Stanton. This year, Aaron Judge. You're the Dodgers. You're paying Mookie Betts. If you're the Red Sox and your highest paid guy at the end of this year is Trevor Story, that's kind of a joke. And I don't think the fan base will be will accept that.
Quickly, the point there is, let's just to say that your plan doesn't play out, and all of a sudden Bogarts leaves and Carlos Correa shows up or Trey Turner shows up. One doesn't necessarily lead to the other. I understand the connection you're making, but they may have a plan in the back pocket. And just quickly, last night there was a kind of a humorous play in the game last night when a ball came off of Wilson Contreras. It bounced behind Max Muncy, and in an effort to go pick the ball up because a base runner was on base, Contreras grabbed at Muncy as if he was falling down the stairs and needed some railing for stability. The problem was what he grabbed or where he grabbed, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we go to commercial break after that, and Justin Turner had been wearing the microphone for us. And you know Justin Turner, incredibly nice and incredibly direct. And so Boog Shambi, who was holding your seat warm last night as play-by-play man, we go to commercial, and he's asking in the booth, like, I don't know, should I ask Justin about that? Because Justin's going to be direct. And I thought of you when Eduardo Perez, I could hear him go, I'll ask him, no problem. which is Eduardo's personality. And so we come back, and I think Eduardo's question to Turner was, how's Max doing? Or something along those lines. And you knew Justin would go where he went to because, within 15 minutes, I think the word junk was trending. I just thought it was just classic. And look, at the end of the year, we're going to be able to put together a top 10 list, a top 20 list of these great mic'd up moments. That was one that certainly got a lot of attention last night.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Description of Max Muncy, who, by the way, we found out last night, despite the fact that he plays third base, he doesn't wear a protective cup. That's insane.
There you go.
I appreciate it, Karl. Great talk with you. Thanks for doing this morning.
Anytime.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.